In the moments of crisis or uncertainty, like when there's tons of tariffs being put on and off and people are worried, what you will see is people are actually going to sell all of their assets and they're going to go towards dollars and treasuries. And so that's exactly what happened a couple of weeks ago. What now has happened is people have said, wait a second, this is actually a situation that there's not some massive calamity on the horizon. I want store of value.
There's a misconception around how these safe haven assets behave. When panic initially strikes the market, whether it's tariffs, war rumors, or systemic instability, people don't immediately run to Bitcoin or gold. Instead, Pomp explains, investors first flee to US dollars and treasuries, seeking liquidity and safety. Only after the immediate chaos subsides do they begin seeking longer-term stores of value. That's when interest in gold, and later Bitcoin, tends to surge.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
Gold and Bitcoin are both sound money assets. So what does that mean? That means that they're outside of the system. They operate outside that legacy financial system, and no one can go create more of it. You can't create more gold. You can't create more Bitcoin. And so when you have sound money, those two assets benefit from the debasement of a currency. It benefits from uncertainty in the market. People think of them as safe haven type assets. Now, when people hear, oh, they're safe havens, they think if there's uncertainty, they have to go up immediately. There's a little bit of nuance I think it's very important to unpack. In the moments of crisis or uncertainty, like when there's tons of tariffs being put on and off and people are worried, what you will see is people are actually going to sell all of their assets and they're going to go towards dollars and treasuries. And so that's exactly what happened a couple of weeks ago. What now has happened is people have said, wait a second, this is actually a situation that there's not some massive calamity on the horizon. I want store of value. And so they started to buy gold. Now, why is gold going up? Gold's up about 20% to start the year. Bitcoin is down about 8%. So people say, well, if both of those assets are sound money, shouldn't they be moving together? If you go and you take a look, I think there's this guy, David Foley and Lawrence Lepard, who both of them put out this chart that shows gold moves first, and about 100 days later, Bitcoin then moves. My thesis as to why this happens is because central banks and large financial institutions, buying Bitcoin is still new to them. Some of them aren't allowed to do it. Some of them don't have investment policies to do it. It's not the thing that they're trained to do. So uncertainty, I want to store value, go buy gold. Then they start to think about it and they say, oh, I also want to go and put a little bit of Bitcoin. And so you're going to see more dollars going to gold than you're going to see going to Bitcoin right now. Over time, that number has been increasing, but I think gold moving first is really a sign of the large capital pools, people who are hardcore into finance. They're the ones who are buying gold first. And then you have kind of the Bitcoin buyers who show up shortly thereafter. And so one of the pieces that I also think is important to pay attention to here is if gold and Bitcoin over the last 12 months are both up about 35%, then what you can see there is that they over longer periods of time, not weeks, but actually years, Bitcoin performs at least as good as gold. And then over really, really long periods of time, it significantly outperforms gold. And I think that you should expect to see that continue to happen here in the coming years. It's all of the weak fiat currencies that have kind of fallen at the feet of these two assets. And where you can see this in the crypto industry is Bitcoin is obviously a digital currency, runs on a public blockchain. But now you have these dollars that are operating on a public blockchain as well with stable coins. And so stable coins are pushing US dollar adoption globally. Bitcoin obviously has become very adopted on that same kind of global base. And so those two assets now are actually moving in concert. They're helping each other. They're reinforcing each other. What are the assets that the United States wants to own? They have dollars and treasuries. They have gold. They have Bitcoin, right? That is kind of the portfolio of strong assets going forward in the future. Now, nobody is like, hey, let's go buy some weak fiat currency. And I think that's really, rather than it be dollars versus Bitcoin, it is now dollars and Bitcoin winning and these weak fiat currencies falling at their feet. And so I would expect that trend to continue. And it's great to see somebody like Bo Hines being, kind of in tune with what's happening there. If you go back and you look at 2020 was a really interesting time. So myself, many others were yelling and screaming, you can't print trillions of dollars and not get high inflation. And frankly, we were mocked, we were ridiculed, we were talked down to, people called us idiots. I mean, you go back and you look, people kind of like whitewashed history, But it was a contrarian view to talk about inflation coming and high levels, because you had the Fed saying that inflation, if it did show up at all, it'd be transitory. You had pretty much a lot of the mainstream media just regurgitating the state talking points. All the economists agreed, don't worry, right?
I forgot how controversial inflation was.
It was highly controversial. And again, I continue to say it, whenever all the economists agree on something, take the other side of the bet. Almost always you can guarantee that they're wrong. And so that's what ended up happening there. Now, if you fast forward and you go and you take a look at this kind of current situation, is I think that the Bitcoiners have really started to understand the economy. And so I would argue that Bitcoiners understand better what's happening with tariffs than many of the mainstream economists, because they have spent years studying bilateral trade, currencies, the entire setup of monetary policy in the United States, fiscal policy, right? They understand these things in a way that most mainstream economists and financial players don't understand. And that's why you see so many different Bitcoiners coming out with unique views. Doesn't mean they're right, but they have a better understanding of certain components of the financial system. And that really ends up actually informing what's going to happen, what's good policy, like those things. We are now shifting. Scott Bessent, we have a Bitcoiner as the Treasury Secretary. The Commerce Secretary is a Bitcoiner. The President is a Bitcoiner, right? You just go down the line. They're all Bitcoiners. And so when you put those people in these positions, of course, they're going to try to get more Bitcoin. And of course, they're going to see the world through a specific lens.
According to Pomp, the U.S. is shifting from a hyper-globalized model, outsourcing manufacturing, relying on fragile international supply chains, and serving as the world's economic police, toward national economic resilience. Scott Bessent, a top economic advisor and Bitcoiner, has outlined a three-pronged approach to reboot America's economy. Tariffs. These are aimed at reshoring manufacturing and generating government revenue. By making foreign goods more expensive, they incentivize American production and job creation.
Recession is like a short-term, relatively immaterial thing in the grand scheme of history. Obviously, people who live in the recession, it's not fun. They're going to lose money. They're going to be financial pain, all that kind of stuff, right? There's no guarantee we're going to get a recession, but it's possible. What he's more worried about is there's a changing of the global world order, right? He is saying, wait a second, we are going from a very kind of globalized strategy. We're going from a world where the United States is going to pay to protect all these places. We're going from a world where global supply chains are set up where you use low-cost manufacturing and labor in Southeast Asia or in other places and then bring the products to the United States. All that's changing. And so there's really two takeaways I have. One, a lot of people got very rich on that old system. If you're going to change the system, a lot of those rich people don't want the system to change because they benefit from it. So that's first. The second thing is what is going to be the new system? There's no guarantee that the new system's better than the old system. We think it will be, but you got to figure that stuff out. And so people are learning in real time, what are the rules of the new game? And so anytime that happens, you're going to see people say, hey, there's some uncertainty here. We got to figure this out. There's going to be mistakes along the way for sure, but we got to be able to course correct and get ourselves in a good spot. And so the thing I've been telling friends in private that I think is important to share here is I keep telling them, we have to do something different. If you don't agree we have to do something different, then you're just asleep at the wheel. So most of my friends all agree, yes, we have to do something different than the path that we were on. The debt was out of control. The interest expenses were exploding. It was very obvious that we were just wasting government funds. We kept collecting more and more tax revenue every year, but the deficit kept getting bigger and bigger every year, right? This is insane. So we all agree that you got to do something different. Where the debate comes into what is the different thing. Right. And I think what Scott Bessent has been talking about recently is kind of this, what he calls a three-pronged approach, is we're going to use the tariffs to incentivize reshoring of manufacturing. We're going to create American jobs. We're going to raise revenue for the government. But that's only one prong of their three. The other one is that they are going to go and they're going to give tax cuts. And so that tax policy specifically focused on people who make $150,000 or less a year, they want to go and give them a big tax cut. That's going to be a massive debate later this year. The third thing is that on top of tariffs and those tax cuts, what they want to basically be able to do is deregulate. And so by deregulating, you now are empowering entrepreneurs and business executives to go and actually build and spur economic activity. So if you can use tariffs, taxes, and deregulation as a three-pronged approach, the goal here is to actually spur that economic growth and make sure that the government continues to be able to function with the funds that it needs. Now, Each one of those strategies is difficult by itself. Doing all three of them together is highly complex. But if you can do it, it's incredibly powerful. And that's where I think a lot of the debate is like, are those the right three prongs? Is what they're saying that they're going to do actually the right strategy? And then the third, and probably the thing that most people disagree on, is can they pull it off? Let's see what happens. I think there's a lot of people, specifically on the opposing political side of the spectrum, that—
But there's plenty on the right.
No, I think that people on the left, whatever they were going to do, they were going to yell and scream. And by the way, if it was reversed, right, whatever Biden did, there's a bunch of people on the right, they were going to yell and scream at that. So I think there's like, take the politicalization out of this for a second. I think that let's focus on Republicans that disagree with the economic policies, right? I think that I hear three critiques. One is I thought that they were going to use the tariffs as negotiating posturing stuff, but they actually weren't going to implement them, right? The second thing is I like the theory, America first. I like the reshoring. I like the job creation. I like all this stuff. I don't like how you're doing it, right? So maybe I'm cool with tariffs up to a certain point. Like Stanley Druckenmiller was like, I like tariffs, but no more than 10%. Yeah. Right. So you get some disagreement in like the severity of the use of them. And then the third thing, and what I actually think is the fairest critique, and I think that the administration knows this and is trying to correct this, is the communication of what they're doing. Right. So if they came out and they said, OK, we spent a couple of weeks, we came up with this plan, we're going to lay out the exact plan. It's a three-pronged approach: tariffs, taxes, deregulation. Here's how it's going to work. We're going to do tariffs. It's going to be 10%. China's going to have higher, blah, 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 whatever. People would say, OK, maybe I don't like what they're doing, but it's very clearly communicated what they're actually going to do here.
We're living through a once-in-a-century shift. The old rules are dissolving. A new economic order is forming, faster than many people realize. And here's the thing. There's no guarantee that the new system will be better, but staying with the old one is no longer an option. Massive debt, unsustainable deficits, and systemic mismanagement have left the U.S. no choice but to pivot. For Pomp, that's the biggest message. We must do something different. Whether you agree with the policies or not, denying the need for change means you're asleep at the wheel. Please like and subscribe.